So today was a very significant day for the 49ers. And in my coverage of this team, and it's coming up on a decade that I've been covering the team, this is one that stands out. Was in the room for both of the John Lynch interviews today at the NFL Combine. And I will say that the words that he used, the way that he described the 49ers strategy moving forward firmly indicate that we are in the midst of a ruthless new 49ers era. The article is up on the San Francisco Standard. We're going to talk about it all. The headline is where we need to start. John Lynch said that Brock have begun to clarify infancy. So I don't want people to read all far into that. But the most interesting line came from that graph. And I could show it to you guys in its entirety. You could read the article on the San Francisco Standard. Link is in the YouTube description. Lynch said, "We're already having good discussions. They've got their thoughts. We've got our thoughts. Just got to try to make it a reality. He's played really well, and we know that. We have every intention of making him our guy. It's just about coming to an agreement. The great news with the CBA and all that, he's going to be with us. So there's no guarantees, but we're going to endeavor to get it done." End quote. All right, it's the final part of that. First, Lynch is saying everything that he had said before, but the last line, the great news with the CBA, he's going to be with us. Lynch is saying he is under contract for 2024, which you can say it's John Lynch and the 49ers leaning into their leverage. Their leverage is that Purdy's under contract. Purdy's leverage is that the 49ers need him to be a Super Bowl contender. And both sides can lean into their leverage. Whoever's leverage is strongest is the one who runs the negotiation. But John Lynch, maybe in sort of a way that marks the 49ers' first public salvo in this negotiation, does refer to the CBA and the fact that Brock Purdy is under contract. As I say here, that no guarantees line, consider that the first piece of public posturing from the 49ers in what's shaping up to be an intense process. Why is it an intense process? Well, because the 49ers are short on money. When we talk about the salary cap, when we talk about the fact that there has been extremely high spend for the 49ers, especially over the course of the past calendar year. But John Lynch today was talking about the high spend, the top 5 spending rate that the 49ers have over the past half decade. I mean, he referred to it more than once. That was what was striking to me. This quote right here, tighter constraints than we've had in the past. Lynch really emphasized that when he was speaking today. And Brock Purdy is eligible for what's almost certainly going to be the biggest contract in 49ers history, but it could also be the largest in NFL history given the way that the quarterback market is going. So you can put 2 and 2 together. There's this expenditure that the 49ers are at some point going to have to make for Brock Purdy, and the team has been spending a ton in the recent past to the point where John Lynch is talking about we got to rein this back. How are those two things going to go together? How are those two ideas, how are those two realities going to mutually work? And that's where the 49ers run into this ruthless new era. And that's why Lynch is saying there are no guarantees that this gets done. Now, he's being truthful on the surface. Purdy has to sign on the dotted line. The 49ers have to sign on the dotted line. Lynch cannot mandate a contract. This is a mutual undertaking. But the fact that he's being bluntly realistic about how difficult this process is going to be really underscores the larger challenge that the 49ers are facing this offseason. I mean, today, John Lynch confirmed that the 49ers are going to oblige Deebo Samuel's trade request. in all likelihood. Well, there are a few reasons why the 49ers are happy to oblige you. They don't normally oblige trade requests, but one of those, and maybe the primary one, is cash savings. You owe Deebo Samuel $17 million or so that you haven't paid him yet in this 2025 season, the last year that he's under contract. So if you are able to trade him away, or if you cut him, you save those $17 million. Kyle Juszczyk is also part of this entire ruthless equation. Take a look at this. This is also in my article up on the San Francisco Standard. Lynch talking about the potential Brock Purdy contract and the effects it can have on the rest of the roster. And he says, everything is tied to everything, particularly when you're talking about a position like the quarterback position and the effect it has on your entire team. It can lift your entire team, but it can affect your entire team. So we'll see where that goes. Our intention is to have a really good team around Purdy, whatever that entails. But the precise size and structure of his contract will have an impact. I tie that into Kyle Juszczyk's future because John Lynch was asked about it. The fullback has been with the 49ers since 2017, but when Lynch was asked about his future, he couldn't guarantee that the 49ers would be able to afford Juszczyk. Lynch said, we'll see. We're thinking of a lot of things right now. We're trying to make everything work with some tighter constraints than we've had in the past. Go to this quote again. Tighter constraints than we've had in the past. That is the theme for the 49ers. Jed York had to spend some money on, a lot of money, on Brandon Aiyuk this past offseason, on Christian McCaffrey, who got an extension. Trent Williams got an extension. The 49ers did not get the ROI they were looking for in season one of those contract extensions. It was a crappy year. A lot of it was out of their control. Injuries, I think a lot of it was the result of accumulation of all the games and all the wear and tear that the 49ers had put on their bodies over the course of the preceding 3 seasons. So it's created a pressure cooker here entering 2025 to get things right because, yes, they did spend a lot of guaranteed money. Jed York did shell out a lot of cash to keep the gang together, reward players, and set the table, reward players for a great run in the seasons prior to these extensions and set the table for more good football to come. But the 49ers were not healthy enough to deliver that football and deliver the ROI, the return on investment for all the spending. So now they're just naturally, both, I think, by cash spent and by salary cap realities, especially considering the fact that Purdy's contract is going to have to live up to the quarterback market. Now they have to tighten their belts a bit. Now they have to get creative entering this 2025 season. How do you pay your quarterback and keep the team good around him? I'm going to have several exercises for you guys, like interactive exercises over the course of the next couple weeks to help illustrate the challenges that the 49ers face. But I think John Lynch talking today at the NFL Combine was an excellent primer for where the 49ers are at. 2024 and the years before that was an ultra high spend cycle for the 49ers. And now they have to figure out a way to make things more cost efficient. Ultimately, the lifeblood, the highway toward this goal is the NFL draft. There's only one method in the National Football League to attain top-level talent at a cost-controlled price, and it is the draft, because the collective bargaining agreement that was signed back in 2010 sets certain prices for certain draft picks. So everything from the number 1 pick all the way down to the final pick, and one of the years it was 262, is slotted for a very definite amount of money. So the draft allows magical bargains like the one that the 49ers got for Brock Purdy when they drafted him in 2022. He's been playing at number 1 level efficiency for 3 years on quite literally the cheapest contract in the National Football League of drafted players over the past 3 seasons. The 49ers have gotten tremendous return on investment for that cheap deal for Brock Purdy, but now it's getting more expensive. It's already quintupled in price to $5 million or so because of proven performance escalators, because Brock Purdy made it to the Pro Bowl. And now, well, obviously his market value is much greater than just $5 million. We're talking something over $50 million, maybe over $60 million. We'll see how these negotiations go. But now the 49ers have to be ready to take that financial hit. And as they do that, they have to take care of the rest of the roster and figure out what works and what doesn't with this football team. So John Lynch delved into so much of this over the course of his talk today at the NFL Combine. There were 2 interview sessions. One was with the general media that was credentialed at the Combine in the big Indianapolis Convention Center exhibit hall. He was up on the lectern. You probably saw the video of that. I uploaded it. And if you haven't seen it yet, then you can go check it out on my YouTube channel. Those of you watching on Twitter, head over to YouTube, David Lombardi over there, and you can subscribe and you'll get all that content. Not everything goes on to Twitter when it comes, or X, I should say. Not everything goes on to X as far as video content goes. But for the big shows like this, I cross-post and I also bust out the old Navy blazer. You know, this is a big show. You know, this is a big deal for the 49ers today. It's an inflection point of sorts when the old friend here, the old Navy blazer, comes out. I think this one has been at a lot of big 49ers games in years past. But, I mean, we're going back to the end of the Garoppolo era, probably the start of the Brock Purdy era for the last time that you've seen this one. So we decided to go to this blazer because it is an important day. The rest of this article goes through the other 49ers news from John Lynch, and I'm going to go ahead and run through that right now because we can get into the cost-cutting items that the 49ers can go through. We can talk more about ruthless performance standards and cost efficiency that the 49ers are trying to establish throughout all of their roster so that they're sustainable and ready for the era moving forward. But that is, on some level, a more philosophical discussion that I'm happy to have in a few minutes. First, I got to get to the day's news for the 49ers, starting with the Brian Griese lowdown. You see the article up on the San Francisco Standard. We talk about Brock Purdy, and we get down to Brian Griese's departure. This is who is replacing Brian Griese. That is Mick Lombardi. So Griese, when he first joined the 49ers in 2022, he had never coached before. I think that's a very relevant thing to continue repeating. The 49ers and Shanahan thought that he'd be a good coach, but they were taking a gamble. Remember contextually where San Francisco was in 2022. Trey Lance was about to take over for Jimmy Garoppolo as QB1 to begin the regular season. So you had an extremely inexperienced quarterback who was the number 3 overall pick in the 2021 draft. There obviously was a lot of apprehension about that because nobody had really seen a lot of Trey Lance. He broke his finger in 2021 in week 3 of the preseason against the Raiders, and I think that started a downward spiral. Never able to grip the ball right in that 2021 season. Jimmy Garoppolo handled the load for most of that year when he was healthy. Even when he wasn't healthy, he had to handle the load in that 2021 season. So really, it ended up being a wash for Trey Lance. I don't know if much development could have happened in 2021 just because he wasn't able to grip the ball properly and throw the ball properly in 2021. So entering 2022, the 49ers, who had made this massive investment in Lance, were in a bit of no man's land. They really needed their young quarterback who came out of North Dakota State, who didn't have a whole lot of college experience either. They really needed him to perform because the roster was really good. They'd just come off an NFC Championship game loss to the Rams. But Lance didn't have the pedigree, the experience to really lend much confidence in that. It was a big-time wild card. So the quarterback coach position in 2022 was going to be extremely important. I mean, you needed to have somebody who was going to be a QB whisperer in that room, somebody who could communicate, somebody who had been there, done that, could communicate what it took to be a quarterback and help teach that and impart that on the young quarterback named Trey Lance that the 49ers had in the building. But there was a twist that offseason. And it was that the 49ers used the final pick of the 2022 draft on a rando, somebody named Brock Purdy. At the time, a lot of people didn't think a lot of it. I remember we did a video on Purdy when the 49ers drafted him, and we said, oh, this guy's a gamer. This guy's making stuff happen at Iowa State. He looked like a more mobile version of Jimmy Garoppolo on tape, more like the 2017 version of Jimmy Garoppolo. And maybe he was airing it out a little bit more. And that was impressive. That was a compliment because Jimmy, especially before the ACL, played some remarkably good football for the 49ers. But still, he was pick number 262 of the draft. And Trey Lance was obviously the future at the time because he was the number 3 overall pick. The 49ers had invested so much in one of the quarterbacks and so little in the other one that people all focused on the QB in whom they had invested a lot. And the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo was still around the facility, working out on the side field by himself while the 49ers practiced in training camp, that made people ignore Purdy even more. But Brian Griese was brought in to be the quarterback's coach in this situation to help shepherd along not just Trey Lance, but the other young quarterback as well, Brock Purdy. Well, we all know what happened at that point. Lance got hurt in week 2. He broke his ankle. Jimmy Garoppolo took over, played really well for the 49ers until he got hurt in week 13. He broke his foot. So then it was time for Brock Purdy. He entered the game against the Miami Dolphins, and the rest was history, including the next week when he beat Tom Brady, and it was the first and only time that Tom Brady would lose a start in his NFL career to a rookie making his first start. The quarterback's coach throughout this all was Brian Griese. Griese was Tom Brady's predecessor at Michigan. So, I mean, that gives you an idea of how long Tom Brady played. Brady was teammates with Brian Griese, and then he faced Brock Purdy, and Brian Griese was Brock Purdy's position coach. That's just mind-boggling, right? You go back to the late 1990s at Michigan, Griese's the starting quarterback, then Brady takes over. And then when Griese went to the NFL, he actually played for Mike Shanahan, obviously Kyle Shanahan's dad, and was the successor to John Elway. Funny enough, like you look at Elway, that was the prototypical Shanahan QB. So was Steve Young, somebody that could throw, that could run. They obviously were hoping to strike that type of gold with Trey Lance. And I think that part of Griese's experience succeeding Elway and working with Shanahan, being at the intersection of all of this stuff, I think influenced the 49ers to say, we want that guy to be the Trey Lance QB whisperer. And he turned out to be the Brock Purdy QB whisperer. And he was very high on Brock Purdy coming out of Iowa State. He was one of the driving vocal forces in the 49ers building in support of Brock Purdy. So Griese's coaching legacy in this 3-year stint with the 49ers will always be connected with A, helping bring Brock Purdy in, and B, helping shepherd efficiency out of a court. I mean, it was one of the most remarkable runs we'd ever seen from a rookie, let alone, a number 262 7th-round draft pick. We had never seen anything like that before. And Brian Griese obviously gets a lot of credit. The next year, Sam Darnold came in after struggling for 5 years with the New York Jets and with the Carolina Panthers. He, like Trey Lance, was a former number 3 overall pick. And Darnold immediately complimented Brian Griese for the leadership that he instilled in him. Griese, I don't think was the biggest X's and O's coach because he had never been a coach before. What Brian Griese brought to the table was presence. He's like, hey, guys, this is how you command a huddle. This is how you earn the respect of your teammates. You demonstrate an even keel. It's football. You're the field general. This is a sport where a lot's going to go wrong, but the highs are going to be exhilarating. So you can't get too high. You can't get too low. Whenever I talk to Brian Griese, a lot of the messaging that he would send to his quarterbacks, he would convey it in our conversations. And you could tell when you watched Brock Purdy play, you could tell when you watched Sam Darnold play, and when Sam Darnold talked about it, that messaging from Brian Griese was registering with the 49ers quarterbacks. They obviously traded Trey Lance away because Sam Darnold beat him out after the 2023 training camp. But the success stories of Purdy and Darnold two young quarterbacks. And in the case of Sam Darnold, somebody who completely turned it around while he was with the 49ers, those two success stories lend so much credence to what Brian Griese did with the team. So now, though, he's gone. He's decided to step away to spend more time with his family. When the 49ers first hired him in 2022, they got a 3-year commitment from him. That's what Griese told them. He wasn't sure if he'd be cut out for the grind, the hours of coaching. And he said, I'll be in this for 3 years. But after the first season, he wasn't so sure. 49ers sweated it out a bit after that 2022 season. But Griese ultimately returned and gave them the 2 more years, 2023 and 2024. And now those 3 years are up, and he decided to step away from coaching. The Jets even wanted to interview Brian Griese for their head coaching position, but he declined it. He didn't think it'd be a principled thing to do, to accept an interview for a job that he didn't want to take. And John Lynch today said that's what Brian Griese is all about. He's a very, very principled man. So he's stepping away, and the guy up on the screen, Mick Lombardi, will be replacing Brian Griese. I will say that I think that Brian Griese was the perfect quarterbacks coach at the perfect time for Brock Purdy and for Sam Darnold last year. Both of those guys needed the type of work and the type of development, leadership development, that Brian Griese was able to give them as somebody who had walked the walk as an NFL quarterback, especially in the specific scenarios that he had been in as an NFL quarterback, ranging all the way back to college with Tom Brady on his team. Well, speaking of a Tom Brady connection, Mick Lombardi was Tom Brady's assistant QB coach in 2019 with the New England Patriots. But on top of that, Mick Lombardi has offensive coordinating experience. He has called plays. He was an OC with the Raiders in 2022 and 2023. And whereas Brian Griese was the perfect QB coach at the perfect time for Brock Purdy in 2022, 2023, and 2024, the formative years of Brock Purdy's career, the rookie deal years of Brock Purdy's career, Mick Lombardi is going to have a chance to show that he's the perfect QB coach at the perfect time for Brock Purdy in the post-contract years, 2025 and beyond. And I say that because Purdy established himself firmly over the past 3 years, especially this past one, as a leader. 49ers, even Shanahan decided to let him speak before that game against the Bears. And you talk to everybody around the building, and they say this is the year that Brock really established himself as a vocal leader. It seems that he's taken so much from Griese, so much from other veterans in the building. He's taken that torch, and he now is a centerpiece for this 49ers team in this new ruthless era where they're going to have to make cuts around Brock Purdy. So they have needed Brock Purdy to grab that torch. But he's developed in the way that the 49ers have needed him to, from a personality standpoint, from a leadership standpoint. Now come the smaller tweaks, generally schematic tweaks. Now it's about becoming one with the offense. I mean, truly, truly mastering the nuances of the game at a very, very intricate level. And the fact that the 49ers have an actual offensive coordinator in the quarterback's coach role now, plus the fact that Clay Kubiak, who is officially their offensive coordinator, just got promoted yesterday, was the assistant quarterback's coach under Brian Griese. I think that's all very significant. It just shows you where the philosophical shift of coaching instruction is moving on this team. It's moving to Purdy to a much more schematically oriented level because he already is a veteran. He's a very successful veteran at that. So that's the lowdown. What a great 3-year run for Brian Griese. And now it's Mick Lombardi's turn to be the 49ers quarterbacks coach for this next era of Brock Purdy's career. More on the news today. We're going to go to Trent Williams, who is definitely going to be back in the 2025 season. On my end, there was never a question. I don't know how this became a story. It seems to have become a story every year. Somebody was commenting, and I responded to the comment in my other video. They were saying, oh, well, this is because Trent Williams indicated that he might retire last offseason, so it's a smart thing to follow up on. I mean, I guess fake reports can just spread like wildfire because Trent Williams has never once indicated that. I mean, this is a guy that I talked to not the most out of any 49ers player in the locker room, but he's in the top 3 or 4 guys. I love talking football with Trent. I mean, he is an encyclopedia. I will say that 3 players, I've learned football from 3 players more than anybody else over, it's almost 10 years covering the 49ers now. The guy who's taught me the most about the game and continues to teach me the most about the game is Richard Sherman. And that goes all the way back to the college days over at Stanford. Nick Bosa, I mean, extremely cerebral. You talk to Nick Bosa, you're going to learn a lot about the game. He in a more soft-spoken manner, right? I mean, Nick, he doesn't talk a lot. The economy of words is real with Nick Bosa. And then Trent Williams, he's definitely in that top 3. I mean, the guy is an absolute football savant. The IQ for Trent Williams is off the charts. Anyway, I love talking to Trent Williams. Never once in any conversation has anything come close to retirement. That rumor, wherever it started, is completely fabricated by somebody who doesn't talk to Trent Williams, who doesn't know what they're talking about. Maybe it's because Joe Staley surprised fans with his retirement after the 2019 season, but I can assure you that Trent Williams wants to play until he's 40. He even publicly said that after signing a contract extension with the 49ers this past off season. Wants to play until he's 40, or it wasn't an extension, or it was just a pay raise. I don't think they tacked on years, but wants to play till he's 40, wants to dominate till he's 40, loves being around the locker room. He believes a lot in Brock Purdy. I think that's really important because if you're not believing in the direction of a team, the wear and tear that this game takes on your body at this age, it's hard to go through that. So he believes in the direction of the 49ers as a team, and they are counting on him to be back with a vengeance next offseason. I could read what John Lynch said about Trent Williams today. He's ready and he's really motivated to come back. That's rarefied air that Trent lives in. I think we're going to see a real motivated Trent Williams. Now, I still think that the 49ers are going to draft an offensive tackle. I think this is the year. I'm just doing the math. I'm doing the math, and I see that Trent is only under contract for 2 more seasons. And I see that Colton McKivitz is only under contract for 1 more season. And the 49ers don't often pick this high. The 49ers, in fact, the last time they were close to this high in the draft was in 2020 or 2021 after the 2020 season. The ideal plan for them is to not be in this kind of draft positioning again, but now they are probably going to be within reaching distance of a solid offensive tackle. Maybe they don't pick one in the first round. Maybe they have some guard tackle versatility that they find in some of the later rounds. And, last year they found an effective offensive lineman in the 3rd in Dominic Pooney. I know he's a guard, but he's still effective enough to start year 1. And I think that surprised a lot of people. But either way, they're going to have to add effectively to the offensive line this offseason. There's no question, just given the contractual situations there. But they strongly believe that Trent Williams makes this offensive line significantly better when he's healthy. And they do expect Trent Williams to be back and healthy in 2025. I think he's already healthy now for the 49ers. Unfortunately, it's February 26th, so we still have a long way to go until the regular season. Then there's the question of this guy, CMC. We got a great picture up on the San Francisco Standard. Article is linked in the description. Look at that. That's the rainbow catch that he made against Tampa Bay. That's Levante David trailing him in coverage. Yeah, I mean, the way that he connected with Brock Purdy, despite being out for the whole season up until this point. So it had been several months since they'd played in a real game together. This was phenomenal. And this shows you just how special, both players. On the quarterback end, we saw Brock Purdy just get absolutely drilled as he made this throw. But Christian McCaffrey to be able to run underneath it. It was a Willie Mays style catch. See that ball even with the helmet on. I mean, that was impressive. Anyway, Christian McCaffrey is healthy. He's going to be part of the 49ers offseason program. John Lynch said that they're going to be judicious with their usage of Christian McCaffrey in the offseason program, as they should be. If he's healthy next season, and you could always knock on wood, Christian McCaffrey is going to be really damn good. I think I said that a few days ago. A healthy Christian McCaffrey is one of the best to ever do it. I mean, this is a special player who not only can he run, but he can make catches like this. He can run routes, get open, and then track the ball at a level that unlocks an entire offense. There's a reason why they doubled down on him financially last offseason, and it was really good news for the 49ers that he is now fully recovered from the PCL. He's already long fully recovered from the Achilles. Remember that he came back from the Achilles and was at full strength against Buffalo. And that was the game where he hurt the PCL. That was just bad luck in the snow. I think a lot of people get those two injuries conflated. But with Christian McCaffrey, there was also an update on Brandon Aiyuk, and he was the other really important weapon on this offense that the 49ers were missing when it came to generating space, generating separation this past year. Aiyuk, he's going to undergo what they call like a little status test on his ACL, on his knee. They tore the ACL and the MCL in a couple weeks. And at that point, the 49ers are going to have a much firmer idea of where Brandon Aiyuk is, because I think they need the good prognosis for his return by the time the NFL draft comes along. Because the biggest weakness on this offense, and for some reason, people aren't wrapping their heads around this. They always want to point at the quarterback or they want to point at the offensive line. But no, the single biggest weakness of the 49ers offense in 2024 was the separation. They weren't getting enough separation. I mean, it was dead last in the league. It was literally, they're at the cellar, bottom floor, wasn't good. And you could trace that back to no Aiyuk, no McCaffrey. You could also start to look at Deebo Samuel and say, okay, this is not just $17 million in savings for the 49ers. It's also a chance, if they move on from him, to find a receiver who's better paired with Brock Purdy, who's pushing the ball further downfield, who needs a separator rather than the bulldozer. But I digress. Away from Deebo Samuel, back to Brandon Aiyuk. 49ers need this guy back because this was the biggest problem on their offense last year. But before getting greedy about an Aiyuk return in week 1 or week 4 or 5, whenever it may be, if he's on the PUP list, before we go crazy with that, we need to consider the bigger picture and realize that the 49ers should probably insulate the receiving room regardless of Brandon Aiyuk's status. But his exact prognosis is going to be valuable for San Francisco ahead of the draft, because they'll know just how much they need to insulate that receiving room. Thankfully, they insulated it last year with Ricky Pearsall on that draft pick, because he's now had a chance to develop and he should be able to hit the ground running in year 2. That's going to help pick up the slack for Deebo Samuel if Samuel does indeed leave. And it should also help pick up the slack for Brandon Aiyuk if Aiyuk is not back or not 100% by week 1. But you can never have too many talented receivers, especially if you're coming off a dead last finish in average separation. And more answers about Brandon Aiyuk will help the 49ers better prepare for the 2025 NFL draft. Aiyuk underwent the knee, or Aiyuk is going to undergo the knee marker test. They call it a marker test in a couple weeks. Curtis Robinson was the other 49er who tore his ACL, the linebacker out of Stanford this past season. And John Lynch said that Curtis Robinson passed his ACL marker with flying colors a couple weeks ago. So Robinson is looking healthy, and I think he might even be ready for week 1 of next season. The problem is that he's not under contract with the 49ers, so we'll see if they find an agreement with him either through the RFA tender process, because he was playing really, really well in the preseason. Curtis Robinson was impressing people a lot. That could have been some of the depth that the 49ers were missing at linebacker last year. But they can either bypass the RFA tender process and try to find a deal with him before free agency, or they can go through the lowest round tender process for Curtis Robinson. But another player who is going to be a restricted free agent is Jordan Mason. And this is a question. I asked Lynch several questions today. This is one that I asked. I asked about Jordan Mason, that I couldn't really get the read on John Lynch, because he gave me basically every single possibility for Jordan Mason moving forward. So obviously that Lynch didn't want to give away the exact plans to a media member today, but we made the video from French Polynesia last week or whenever we were there. They could original round tender Mason, but they wouldn't get any draft compensation back because he was an undrafted free agent. So original round tender means you get the draft pick that of the level of around where the player was chosen. That would be nothing for Jordan Mason. They could second round tender him, which would mean if another team pays more than the 49ers, offers more, and the 49ers don't match, they would get a second round pick. That'd be a sweet deal, but it would also cost over $7 million to second round tender Jordan Mason. So, and I don't think a first round tender is on the table, but you wonder, what is Jordan Mason's market value to the rest of the league based on how well he ran the football this past year? And when some of the metrics favorably compare him to Derrick Henry, I think more than just the 49ers are going to pay attention. But then you also consider that the 49ers running backs room is built on talents like this. Christian McCaffrey being able to catch passes like this out of the backfield. Isaac Guerendo trying to work to be not too far behind him. Guerendo was a receiver before he was a running back in college. So he definitely is on the up and up with the 49ers and how they're trying to build their offense. So in a way, Jordan Mason is a luxury weapon for this team. And if they're going to be so ruthless with some of these cost-cutting items, I mean, we talk about Kyle Juszczyk at $4.6 million possibly being too expensive for the 49ers. Well, in that case, I think a second-round tender of $7+ million for Jordan Mason would definitely be too expensive. I mean, he's a power back, like a closer-type back that doesn't see the same down-in, down-out type of impact when running backs ahead of him aren't hurt that Kyle Juszczyk does. So you would think that would be too high of a price. So the 49ers absolutely are going to have to get financially creative here. Maybe they're going to cut fat from this roster at other spots to be able to keep high upside guys they really like Jordan Mason, be able to keep somebody like Kyle Juszczyk to keep that glue of the offense together since he's so important to what Kyle Shanahan does. But I mean, there's a reason why I titled this show what I titled it. John Lynch literally said no guarantees today in the context of Brock Purdy, but there are no guarantees in the context of Deebo Samuel. Lynch even smiled and said he could be back for all I know. I mean, everybody thought Jimmy Garoppolo was going to be gone in 2022, and then he ended up coming back to the 49ers for his final season. So you can never say never, but there literally are also no guarantees when it comes to the future of Kyle Juszczyk, which I think is very, very notable. That's the writing up on the San Francisco Standard. You know who else didn't have any guarantees to come back or to be good again? This is going to make people happy and upset at the same time because this is just an emotional lightning rod. Jake Moody. For some reason, fans are finding, and I don't know if it's fans or if it's just content creators, but people are finding reason to be upset about the stance that John Lynch took on Jake Moody after I asked him about Jake Moody. I feel like I asked all the important questions today. Jake Moody, I said, hey, I know how much he struggled ever since the high ankle sprain. Are you going to bring in competition? Does that compel you to have another kicker in the building as a backup plan? And, I framed the question around the high ankle sprain intentionally. I think context is really important when you're dealing with situations like these because Moody was 14 of 15 before the high ankle sprain, before DJ Dallas trucked him in that game against Arizona where it was 106 degrees down on the field. And he was 11 of 20 after he came back from that. And I'm so glad that I prefaced the question with the high ankle sprain because John Lynch went right into the injury talk. I wanted to know how the 49ers felt about the impact of that injury on Jake Moody's performance. And John Lynch straight up said, I could even find it here in the article. I'm going to give you the exact quote. He said that the 49ers did think that the injury had a lot to do with his struggles. We still have a lot of belief in him, and we believe the injury had a lot to do with the struggles. As Lynch even added, we maybe kicked ourselves for letting him come back too early. It's really an odd injury. We've consulted soccer teams. We've consulted with everybody. So the 49ers see this the way that we predicted they'd see it. Lynch did not rule out bringing in competition for Jake Moody. That's why I asked. I thought that was almost a no-brainer at this point, because even if the injury is the reason why he started struggling, and the data clearly tells us that that was the case, even if that's the case, there's no guarantee that he's going to come back to form. So you have to have a backup plan ready in this league. Unfortunately, pardon my French, shit happens. And for Jake Moody, the high ankle sprain did happen. The 49ers special teams is so bad, they got another kicker hurt on kick coverage just 5 days after that when Matthew Wright was trying to make a tackle against the Seattle Seahawks. So that's water under the bridge. Now Jake Moody has to figure out a way to get past it. What was really interesting to me is that Lynch insisted that even if there is a competition, he believes that Jake will rise to the top. And it sounds like there will be a competition. I mean, the way that I framed the question and the way that Lynch jumped onto the whole idea of a competition and said, yeah, that's something that we might have to do, that leads me to believe the 49ers will bring someone in. But there still is a belief in Jake Moody, and they think that he's going to win that competition this offseason. And if he gives them a 14-15 start and does that over the course of a full season, so, triple that. Say that Jake Moody goes, this is going to test my math, 42 of 45. Yeah, it'll have been worth it for the 49ers. There's no guarantee that that's going to happen. You could also miss 3 kicks to open next season. The 49ers are going to have to be ready to move on to the next option at that point. It is a cutthroat league. It's a ruthless league, but it also needs to be a rational league. And you can't just irrationally call for Jake Moody to be cut when he's got 2 years left on his contract. And he's not really taking up too valuable of a roster spot while this is still at a 90-man equation for the 49ers in the offseason. So we predicted that they would operate this way. They indeed will operate this way with Jake Moody. There's also hope for a couple of defensive stars to come back for the 49ers. That is Talanoa Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw. In fact, the Greenlaw quote is especially interesting. Look at this from John Lynch. I've got to find this one. I think this might have been the single most optimistic line from the entire news conference. Hopefully, we come to agreement before free agency with Dre Greenlaw. I mean, this has been a saga and a half. This has been crazy. First, we saw the family members' posts after the season, the goodbyes to Dre Greenlaw. Everybody figured, oh, he's gone for sure. And everybody's like, wait, hold up. This is way more complicated of a situation than just being able to say he's going to be gone the date after the season ends. Then there was the whole Robert Saleh saga. It took like a month to hire Robert Saleh. A funny quote from John Lynch. We'll get to that in a bit. But it took a really long time for the 49ers to hire Robert Saleh. When they finally did hire him, Nick Bosa let it slip at the Pro Bowl. He said that Robert Saleh is adamant that they bring back Dre Greenlaw. So I asked John Lynch today about Dre, and I specifically framed it within the Nick Bosa thing. I said, Nick Bosa said that Saleh is adamant about this, and John just started laughing, and he said, Saleh loves Dre Greenlaw, but I promise you it was not part of our negotiations. Maybe it was. Sure, John. We'll see if that was the case or not. I'm kidding. I'm sure that it wasn't part of the negotiations, but I'm sure that Robert Saleh has made it known that he really wants Dre Greenlaw back. So anyway, when Bosa said that at the Pro Bowl a few weeks back, all of a sudden the probability meter swung back in the favor of the 49ers re-signing Dre Greenlaw. And I feel that it's cooled off a bit over the past few days, couple weeks. But now we have this. This is from John Lynch today. Hopefully we can come to agreement before free agency with Dre Greenlaw. He was 100% serious. We'll see. So March 10th is the opening of the legal tampering window. That's when other teams would be allowed to start talking to Dre Greenlaw. That's when the market opens up and can make things more difficult for the 49ers. So if they could get something done before then, as John Lynch hinted might be possible, then Dre Greenlaw's back in a 49ers uniform. And I think that would make fans very, very happy. So just take a look at that line and then take a look at this entire article. This is John Lynch. No guarantees for the 49ers, and that includes Brock Purdy. Purdy, check. Deebo, Dre Greenlaw, although he's not technically on the 2025 roster at this point, but also no guarantees for his return. 49ers are tightening their belts this offseason. They're trying to make a financial stand here, and they currently have the second most money tied up in void years in the future, which means they have spent a ton over the past several seasons. And like the Eagles, they've been very forward thinking. They have pushed salary cap expenses into the far future. The Eagles have done it even more aggressively than the 49ers, but especially last offseason when the bills for Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Aiyuk came due, the 49ers shelled out a whole heck of a lot of cash. So we heard John Lynch talking about the tighter constraints that they're going to face this offseason. And we're already seeing some of the effects of those constraints. 49ers readily agreeing with Deebo Samuel. Trade request, oh yeah, we'll honor that. We think we're better off for it too. I mean, that type of divorce, the 49ers have not gone for that type of divorce in the past. And I get it. There have been contract posturing trade requests in the past where the guy didn't really want to leave, like Raheem Mostert. Like nobody believed that he actually wanted to leave when he requested a trade. Nobody believed Deebo Samuel in 2022. Nobody believed Brandon Aiyuk in 2024. That was just a big dramatic mess. Ultimately, those guys just wanted the best possible contract. They ultimately had to put their money where their mouth was, and that was signing a new deal. Deebo Samuel for what? $23 million annually. Aiyuk for $30 million annually. Raheem Mostert got a pay raise or guaranteed pay raise from the 49ers. That was all the way back in 2020. So normally, like, trade requests are not obliged by the 49ers. In this case, they're like, oh, trade request from Deebo Samuel. Oh, we were thinking about asking you for a pay cut anyway. I'm not sure on that front, but I get the sense that that was going to happen because Deebo wasn't very good last year, and he just doesn't fit as well with the vision they have with Brock Purdy, given the separation and given the style of play. But regardless of who came to who first, they had the exit interview, and there is a mutual understanding that both sides might be better off parting ways. Amicable divorce, if you will, at this point between the 49ers and Deebo Samuel. There's an outside chance that things still work out at a lower price with the 49ers. It's like a never say never kind of situation, but I can guarantee you that it is very, very small at this point. And John Lynch said there's a lot of interest in Deebo Samuel. He said hopefully they can find a good trade partner, something that makes sense to the 49ers, because they're taking on a lot of dead money in the short run for this. They're saving the $17 million over the course of the long run, and cap space carries over from year to year. But you do take that acceleration right away. They've got $46 million in cap space. I'll open up the cap sheet here in a second so we could talk about this ruthless new 49ers era and some of the money questions that this team is facing. But they have a lot of short-term room that opens them up to flexibility in situations like this, so that, yes, they can shoulder a $31 million dead money hit for Deebo Samuel and fit it in under the financial hood of the cap situation if it means that they can save $17 million in the long run and bring in another draft pick or 2 draft picks or however much it's going to cost, because those are cost controlled and you could save money that way. So yes, the 49ers can operate in a way that gives them the adaptability to make such moves here in 2025, but they more and more with every passing day, every passing month, and especially every passing year, they have to be thinking about the long-term financial setup of this football team. You give Brock Purdy a deal from 5 to 7, maybe 8 years. I don't know how long it's going to be, but you give Brock Purdy a contract that's going to be a long-term commitment. You gave Brandon Aiyuk a contract that was a long-term commitment. You're on a long-term commitment to Nick Bosa. You're going to be trying to re-sign George Kittle. There's going to be new rookies coming in for the 49ers. Salary cap space carries over from year to year, and you have to make sure that you are surfing the wave appropriately of the rising cap moving into the future. And this is why I maintain my salary cap sheet, so I can illustrate how the 49ers are going to want to architect things moving forward. And a look at it shows you that they've got that $46.2 million in 2025 space, but there's still a lot of work to do this year. Purdy's contract, obviously the headliner. That's what we're talking about right now. Deebo Samuel, that cap hit might increase, probably will increase if you move on from him this season, because you're going to trade him and shoulder $31 million instead of $15 million on the cap due to the dead money acceleration. Somebody like George Kittle, yes, they want to extend him. That would lower the cap hit. That would bring some of that money back, but you'd still would be operating with a lot less room than you have right now. And then you've got to think about Brock Purdy's cap hits increasing in the future. You have to think about all those growing expenses. And in the past, the 49ers have carried over between 40 and 50 million from one year to the next. I'll venture out and say they're not in line to carry over 40 million from 2025 to 2026. Once they're done with all these expenditures, they might only be carrying over about 20 million. And then at that point, you say, is that going to be sustainable for their cap growth over the next few years, given the fact that the limit is projected to continue rising? That obviously helps the 49ers, but they have to stay under the limit. So it's going to be this constant balancing act. And that's why even Kyle Juszczyk is part of the ruthless equation. That's why the 49ers seem so eager for $17 million of savings regarding the Deebo Samuel situation. This, I mean, it's not new, because last year the 49ers were already headed in this direction. Last season, they came to Eric Armstead and they said, hey, are you going to take a pay cut? We need you to take a pay cut. They went up to Kyle Juszczyk and they said the same thing. Armstead said no. They released him. Kyle Juszczyk said yes. He stayed aboard for at least one more season. But now John Lynch says that even he's not sure about Kyle Juszczyk's future. That's all in this article up on the San Francisco Standard. So it's already been an efficiency-seeking, cost-cutting set of maneuvers for the 49ers, not just this offseason, but the one prior to it, as they're laying the groundwork, getting ready for this. And it is the natural byproduct of spending more on A-list contracts than any other team in the NFL since John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan took over. So it's a good problem to have. They've had to pay a lot of guys, but the 49ers are having to be very creative, especially given the losing season, especially given the fact that Jed York, the owner, had to pay out big money to Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams, and Brandon Aiyuk ahead of a losing season. They are in between this rock and a hard place because those investments came last year, then came a 6-11 season, and now the investment in Brock Purdy, maybe the largest in NFL history, is coming next. So you can understand why the 49ers are having to be ruthlessly efficient at all margins, and that was the message today from John Lynch. Now, it's fitting that that message came at the NFL Combine, because the NFL Combine is the lifeblood, the lifeblood of the financial situations, the NFL draft. But the prelude, the table setter for the NFL draft is the Combine. And today, defensive tackles and defensive ends and linebackers and kickers. I mean, we talked about Jake Moody, but kickers were on the interview circuit in Indianapolis. These are all positions that the 49ers are obviously interested in. So where's that going to go? How's that going to mesh with what they're looking at up front? I think they have to take an offensive tackle at some point this year. But are they going to try to get creative with the offensive line? Or are they going to go mid-round like they did last year with Dominic Pooney? Do they feel that they have a scouting method now that allows them to not have to take an offensive lineman in the first round? Because that means you could save those early round picks for the defensive line. Or do they feel that the extremely deep class of defensive tackles, 41 of them in Indianapolis, do they feel that allows them to wait until the second round to try to fortify that defensive line? And then, they still have to sign guys to the secondary, maybe even draft guys to the secondary. I mean, the 49ers are at a major, major crossroads here, and it's going to be a challenging one to navigate moving forward, which is why the draft is a must hit. They need an encore of 2024, which, by the way, seems like it's been very successful after just 1 year. But you can talk about Ricky Pearsall, looked great, 10 this season, 18 targets over the final 2 weeks. Ronaldo Green, they got a dog at the cornerback position. You know, every time they go out and they draft a dog at cornerback, Mike texted this to me today, it seems to work out for them. I mean, you go back to DJ Reed, Deommodore Lenoir, Ronaldo Green. I guess Deommodore Lenoir is more of a hyena than a dog because that's his preferred nickname. But all these guys were built scrappy, like in college. I mean, these were guys that fought at that cornerback position. Those guys have really worked out, whereas the players like Ambry Thomas and Akello Witherspoon, who are known as not, they weren't as physical in college, those guys didn't work out. So maybe the 49ers cornerback formula works in the lower rounds. Talk about Lenoir as a 5th rounder. You talk about DJ Reed as a 5th rounder. Maybe they sign him this offseason. Maybe that's what the 49ers need to do to replenish that cornerback position, with Charvarius Ward likely leaving this offseason. When my roster builder comes out up on the San Francisco Standard next week, you guys are going to have a chance to go through all of these moves. I'm going to give you a chance to build the 49ers team. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel right now. You can go ahead and subscribe to the San Francisco Standard as well, and be ready for that, because I think it's going to be a perfect mix with this ruthless new 49ers era. You're going to make the efficiency cuts yourself as you pare down this 49ers roster, figure out who's delivering for the price and who isn't. And those are the challenges that the 49ers are going to have to face themselves. It's going to be a fascinating next month or so, and we're going to be able to cover every single step of it. I'm going to open this up to 49ers questions for maybe a couple minutes, maybe a little bit more. But the 49ers Q&A is now open. Oh my God, we got 636 comments. Supreme asking me, what is Robert Saleh's contract deal? He's one of the highest paid defensive coordinators in football. That's the only detail that I know. As far as term goes, if he gets offered a head coaching job, he can leave. You can't hold a guy from a promotion. You can't go take another defensive coordinator job if they have him under contract for 2 years or however long they do. But Robert Saleh is being paid very well, since he is one of the best in the game, and he already has that head coaching line on his resume. Congratulations to Chris. He's in the hospital with his wife. His son is coming on Friday. Everybody, a round of applause for Chris, who I believe, is that Tom Brady in a 49ers uniform in your avatar? That's funny, but congratulations to Chris. That is really, really good news. The defensive tackles start running through drills at the NFL Combine tomorrow. Yes. They did interviews today. They start going through drills tomorrow. You can watch it on NFL Network. Invader 49er asks, is this tightening of the belt coming from Jed York? I mean, he's the one that's writing the checks. I can't verify if it's coming from York or not, but you just follow the clues. Listen to John Lynch talk. Listen to him saying, there's tighter constraints than usual. We know that, like, if you give guys massive signing bonuses, you can just push the cap hits indefinitely into the future. Like, the 49ers can surf that salary cap wave. The language that we heard from John Lynch today was very, very focused on cash spent. Like, he was talking about money spent. It didn't seem to be as salary cap related as his comments. So I'm reading in between the lines, and cash spent when Lynch is talking about that. And then I compare it to, or I associate it with, okay, they gave Christian McCaffrey a new deal. They gave Trent Williams a new deal. They gave Brandon Aiyuk a new deal this past offseason. That was all expensive business. And of course, they haven't exactly gotten their ROI on that. I just kind of put 2 and 2 together. And anybody, like, even if this is not about the front office, like, running out of money, I think it's just, this is John Lynch. You can just take this at surface level saying, we've got to be more cost efficient. He pointed out today that they've got the oldest team in the NFL. They did this past year. So you can't just go out there and buy free agents every offseason. You have to succeed through the draft. And they succeeded in 2024. They've got to deliver an encore in 2025. So even if you have all the money in the world to spend, that has never proven to be a Super Bowl formula on its own. You have to develop through the lifeblood. That's the NFL draft. So forcing your way into greater cost efficiency might actually force your way into being a better, more robust football team. Sometimes you just got to trim the fat. And I think that's what the 49ers are dead set on doing this offseason. And I will say they already started with this mentality last offseason. A lot of people are not recognizing that. They're like, oh, this is something totally new. This is a progression of the maniacal focus on efficiency that started in 2024. I think a big watershed moment was when they asked Eric Armstead to take a pay cut, and then obviously also asked Kyle Juszczyk to do the same last year. All right, we've gone an hour. James chimes in. Thanks, James. He's got dead cap hits. Yeah, they're $15 million of the money hit for Eric Armstead this year. They had a lot of void year money with Mooney Ward. The void years will amortize, and you've got to hope that the rising salary cap helps cancel that out. It's all part of surfing the wave. The Eagles have done it too, but I think that it might be wise to not confuse cash spent with salary cap machinations, because those could be related, but two slightly different things. Everybody, you would do us a huge favor by hitting the like button on YouTube right now. If you're watching on Twitter, go over to David Lombardi on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit both of them. Subscribe is probably better. Leave a comment, do all that good stuff. You could even leave one of these great super chats. That would be awesome. But above all else, why don't you go to the San Francisco Standard? I mean, look at this piece that I wrote today from the NFL Combine. Mick Lombardi, Christian McCaffrey, talked about Jake Moody, highlighted the quote about Dre Greenlaw, and of course, led it with John Lynch. Video on John Lynch is up on the YouTube channel as well. So hit subscribe, go to the description of the YouTube, and check out the San Francisco Standard. You've got 2,000 words on the 49ers, the most in-depth coverage that you'll see anywhere. Everybody, thanks for watching. It's been a fun show. We will talk to you tomorrow.